You're listening to the 40 Thrive Podcast, the show created for women 40 and beyond, ready to shake things up. And now, your host, Jackie McDougall.
Welcome to another episode of 40 Thrive. Let me ask you a question. Do you feel like you're at a crossroads? Are you trying to figure out what's next in your life? What if there were a way to understand your strengths to help you maximize those next steps? Well, there is. Today, I will introduce you to Jenny Ketchepaw. She is a certified Gallup Strengths Coach, and she serves as VP of Talent Engagement for a bank where she manages the training and leadership development. Jenny is a whiz when it comes to helping us find our strengths, but not only that, but then Jenny teaches us what to do with those strengths in business, in our families, in our relationships. It's really a game changer. I recently asked in the 40 Thrive community, what would you say is your greatest strength? And I got about 50 answers in there, from the ability to see beyond difficulties, being resourceful. When someone decides to do something, she does it, working well under pressure, resilience and patience and forgiveness. There are some amazing strengths in the 40 Thrive community. Go over and check out that post on Facebook. But before you do, let's get into my conversation with Jenny Ketchepaw. Jenny, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
I have been following, Facebook is great for that, but we live in the same community, and I've been following your career and all of the nonprofit work and all of it seems like you're like the Energizer Bunny, mom of 2 small kids, but you just keep going and going and going. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here.
I love it. I love how fast this happened. I'm really excited as well. I've loved everything that you've been doing with 40 Thrive, and I think it's just really cool.
Thank you. Thank you. So, one of the things that I have discovered as I've gotten older and that I'm not educated in, but passionate about, is really understanding what makes us tick and what makes us who we are right now. Taking all of the, past experiences and all the things that we've done. But one topic I've always wanted to talk about was a variety of all of these assessments that are out there that help us understand who we are. You're a certified Gallup Strengths Coach. That's so hard to say. Tell me, when is the first time you really discovered the assessment and Strengths Finder and all of that, and how did you get into it?
Okay. 2007, I took my very first assessment when I was on a nonprofit board, and it was part of our strategic planning session to kind of better understand our team dynamic, what we each brought to the table. And I remember sitting there and looking at my report and going through the session with the trainer and thinking for the first time, like, I feel really seen. Like, what's in your heart. Sometimes you know who you are, but to have it like really articulated in just a report, and then to be doing this session and then having other people that you work with say, oh my gosh, I see that in you. It was really, it really did. Like, it changed my life. It changed my career. It changed the way I look at things. And I love kind of what you were talking about. We're all unique. And that's the whole idea of this, is we all are unique, but we often are really, especially as women, we're really good at looking at what we don't do well. And we look at what other people don't do well. And this is the opposite of this. This is really saying, look at what you do well and really lean into that. Do you better, and recognize that you're not the same as the person sitting next to you. You don't need to compare yourself to somebody else. It's really what makes you special, what makes you unique, and then capitalize on that. So I remember sitting there and like feeling like my heart was like filling up, and I was like, this is incredible. And I was like, how do I do more of this? And so a lot of it for a long time was just self-taught. Like, I just read everything I could about strength finders and did all my own research. And then everybody started coming to me and do training on this. And I did it for free for a really long time for nonprofits and for my friends in the JC community. And I just had so much fun with it. And it changed the way I was looking at my own career. And so I made a move in the banking world from more on the sales and retail side to HR, which is a massive change. And that was because my boss at the time had a strength-based philosophy and says, what do you do best? And I was like, I can train other people and I can do leadership development. That's what I do best. Never even saw me do it. And he's like, well, we talked about strength finders. He's like, let's do it. And that was 8 years ago. And I was like, I'm meant to be in HR. And since I've worked with thousands and thousands of people with their assessments on Strength Finder. So I've been training Strength Finders for many years. And then it was only in the last year that I became a certified coach. And it was really cool because I got to take it to the next level. But it was also reinforcing like, okay, everything that I've been talking about for the last 10 plus years is correct.
Right, right. So that's pretty amazing. First of all, I have to know, what were the strengths? So I know that you can go over there and I'll link to the assessment in
Okay.
the show notes, but you can get, and this is what I did years ago, was the top 5.
Yes.
That's like the $20 version. And then there's a much more detailed version for 50
yes.
bucks. So now I feel like I have to dive into that one. But
You have to. So when I took it in 2007, I only got my top 5. I only got my full 34 last year. And it was like, my mind was blown because I'm a different person than I was all those years ago.
yes.
But the weird part is my detailed report and unlocking my 34 is probably more me today than it was 13 years ago. And what's really neat is because I've really been working on my strengths all this time. It was really neat I was a cool case study in a way, because most people unlock it right away.
Right.
And so for me to have done that, and I did that in the class, I spent a week with Gallup and we did a really deep dive. And I was like, oh, so yeah. So I had my top 5 for a long time and I worked those top 5. And then it was only in the last year that I have access to all of them.
Right, right. So you gotta share. What are your top 5?
Positivity. I know, it's a shocker, right?
What?
I know. Woo, which is winning others over.
Okay.
Communication, input, and discipline.
Oh, wow. Those are totally different from mine, I'll tell you.
What are yours?
Oh, I printed them out because I was like, oh, she's going to ask me. So I don't know that I have them in order necessarily of how they came up, but I just have the 5. Communication, command,
Ooh, that's a good one.
relator, looking here, strategic, and activator.
Ooh, excellent. I will tell you, so in all the research that I've done and all the classes that we've been taking, command is a really powerful one. Very rarely does it come up in women's profiles. It's one of the most rarest strengths for women. And a
Really?
lot of women, there was a girl in my class and she was like, I can't believe I have command as my number 1. And as we talked, because a lot of people will take their assessment sometimes and they're like, oh, I don't know if this is me, or I don't know if they don't want to claim it. We call it like name it, claim it, aim it. And they sometimes don't want to claim it. And we were talking to her and she gave us the best scenario. She's like, I don't feel like I necessarily take command of a room. She goes, but if there's an emergency, I'm the one everyone's going to look to because I'm going to be level-headed and I'm going to have the presence to get people out and to take care of it. And so it was really neat because at first she was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about command. And then she really owned it, which was really cool.
Right. I think that's one of my favorite ones. I mean,
Good.
I really enjoy, I love to make a decision. I know that sounds so weird, but I'm a firm believer that when you don't make a decision, you're making a decision. And
That is
so
correct.
you might as well sort of direct things in the way that you want them to go and not have them go that way because of default. And so, yeah, give me a decision to be made and I'm all over it. But I also have 7 brothers.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Yeah.
And so I do
That
have 5
works out.
sisters, but as far as like the people who are around me age-wise, it was all boys, older than I am. So I think I didn't necessarily have that fear. I find that with a lot of women who, there's a fear in making decisions, especially over 40, which is crazy to me because we're the ones who've had all this experience in our lives and we've made some pretty poor choices probably at times. I know I have. I call that my 20s. But it's because of those choices that I'm here today doing exactly what I'm doing. So I don't know. I'm all about
I
it.
think
So
in your command and communication together, like being able to have that presence, but be able to communicate that so articulately, like that's what's really incredible. And obviously you're doing that right now.
oh, well, thank you. I guess I'm doing the right thing with my life, right?
So your relator and my woo are what we call like opposing strengths or complementary strengths if we want to be more positive about it. So they're like naturally different, but when we like accept those differences, then like from a team dynamic, we're really, really good. So woo is social breadth. Like there's no strangers. I'll talk to anybody. Relators are like, whoa, because they're social depth. So they want to like keep their core super, super tight. So if we don't like take a strength-based approach and we just look at people that are different than us and we're like, oh, different, bad, then we're not really open to creating a better team dynamic. But when we're like, wow, look, Jackie, you're different than me. You're really good at going deep and I'm really good at bringing in all these new people. How can that be a power combination from a team dynamic together? And so a lot of times what can be the most complementary strengths on teams are the ones that drive us nuts. Like my discipline drives everybody in my house nuts because I'm very organized and orderly. But like I will hear my husband talking about me. He's like, our house runs smoothly because of Jenny. And I'm like, see, Told you.
He may not love it, but he appreciates it.
He doesn't love it in the moment, but
Yeah.
overall, he's like, yep.
Right. So I find in the 40 Thrive community, there are a lot of women, especially now, who are sort of at a crossroads or in a transition, maybe changing jobs, maybe just lost jobs, maybe starting new businesses. How would you use your strengths when you go to Strengths Finder and you find out like what your strengths are? How would you use them to move forward in maybe an area that you're not familiar with?
I love that question because a lot of people will ask too, oh, look at my strengths. What should I do for a job? And it's not really like that. It's about how can I utilize my strengths for whatever my new goal is, for whatever my plan is. So when you kind of understand what your strengths are, and you have to, I really tell people you have to be open-minded. Like not everyone's going to have the heart glowing moment like I did.
Right.
But a lot of people, when they really sit on it, when they really think about it, what the question I'll ask is, think about all the stuff that went really right in your life. When you nailed something, can you look at your strengths and tell me how that may have been a part of that? And then they're usually like, oh, that makes sense. And so when you look at your strengths and when you can really say, okay, this is me, when you kind of claim that and you say, yeah, this is me, then you have to put some intention behind it. So the whole philosophy is we all start with talent, natural talent. And a lot of us don't even tap into that talent. And I like to equate it to like Simone Biles, right? She's amazing. She was born with natural talent. There's no denying that. But she doesn't just show up on, meet days and perform.
Right.
She puts investment into it. And that's the whole Gallup philosophy too, is you have natural talent in you and we may or may not be using it, but when we actually put investment into it, when we think about it, when we really aim it, then that really becomes a true strength. So that's why I tell people, if they're looking for a new endeavor or they're looking for that like fulfillment of what am I supposed to be doing? When you think about your report and your natural talents, you may or not be using those natural talents right now. And really thinking about what can I do every day to kind of lean into that talent? What can I do to actually utilize it? And more now, like just with everything going on right now, I'm thinking about my strengths every single day because that's what's getting, obviously my positivity is getting me through this.
Right.
But my discipline is really helping me a lot. My input is really helping me a lot. And when you do it on a regular basis, it becomes more natural. And then it becomes just, you're better at that in those spaces. So for people being flexible and nimble and changing jobs or starting something new, it helps to have confidence. And that confidence comes to, what do I do best? How do I do more of that?
Right. So you brought something up that's really curious for me. So when you see somebody's, let's just say the top 5, or they dive into, the 34, do you recommend jobs for them or career changes, or do you at least like shed light on some of the things that they could be doing based on their results?
Yes and no. So I don't do it in you'd be a great trainer, although, because there's lots of different strengths that could utilize that. So a lot of your strengths can be used for the things that you want to do. So we talk about what do you love doing? And when you look at like the broader sense of some of the talent strengths, like I was coaching someone, her number one strength was ideation, which is basically like she is the best brainstormer in the world. And so she needs to be and she's like, Jenny, I come up with ideas all the time. So she needs to be in an environment where her thoughts are looked upon in a positive way. Like people want to say, hey, tell me what your idea is on this. So it's not that she needs to change her role necessarily, but what can she do in her current role to articulate that to her bosses or to the people she's working with? Say, look, I'm a really great brainstormer. When you're having those sessions, I want to be a part of it. I want to share ideas. I want the collaboration. So finding ways to kind of like volunteer and put your hand up and say, I'm good at this. I want to do more of this. But a lot of people, when they first get their strength results, they struggle with the articulation part. Like, oh, I'm positive. How do I use that positivity? And
right.
we sometimes look at other people's strengths as a weakness. So many times in my life, people think my positivity is a weakness. And it used to really bring me down. Not anymore. The older I get, the more I'm like, Gallup says it's a strength. It's just a natural thing that we do sometimes when we look at someone that's different than us or doesn't have the same strengths, and we make those assumptions, or we make an assumption that can't be genuine. And so and Gallup goes into all of those, which is really cool too. So I can work on that for myself and being like, okay, how might other people see me? How can I work on some of those pieces? Which is interesting, like when you want to take strengths to the next level. But basic level is like looking at it and saying, what is me and what is not? Because, while I love Gallup, I don't pretend to say it's absolutely perfect. You might see something in there and be like, I don't know if that's me. What I always tell people, like highlight the stuff that really stands out, the stuff that you're most proud of that you want to share with other people, and ask other people their thoughts, because they'll positively reinforce a lot of that. They'll be like, oh my gosh, I saw a time when you did this and you were really using your strategic, or it was really great when you made that decision. And we call it power and edge. And I think as women, figuring out what our power and edge is, what makes us different, that's amazing. And that's how we can turn that into success.
You just nailed what I'm trying to do with 40 Thrive, like in a sentence, because we've all lived our lives. We've all made choices. We've all have these unique experiences. So some women will take their experiences and then think that their identity is the sum of those experiences in a negative way. Another woman will take those experiences and believe she's the sum of those experiences in how she got through them. I think the Strengths Finder is perfect because it shows all of the things that we've done. It shows all of the ways that we've grown and what we can do in the future.
You gave me chills. I like that.
And I love chills. But I would love to give, let's imagine for a second someone's listening and she's like, okay, I'm going to find out what my strengths are. And I want to move forward with that. There are different ways that you can incorporate your strengths into your life. And in a second, I want to get into your personal life because it's not all career, not all of
It's
the
whole life. You're right.
Yes. But some may say, okay, now I can up my game in the position I have using these strengths. Other people may find their strengths and know that what they're doing is not really aligned with who they are. What kind of advice would you give that person?
I was that person. So I was in a role and I was miserable. And that was really at odds with my positivity. And I had a brand new baby and my husband's job was changing and I had the weight of the world on my shoulders and I was in the wrong position. And quite honestly, I was working for the wrong person too. And I'm used to being a performer and I wasn't performing. I was in a sales role that was not aligned with my strengths. And I was really, really struggling and I didn't know what to do. And I can't just go out to the community and be like, hey, I'm not doing well in my job. Like I had all these connections, but I couldn't even use those connections. And I just felt like, how do I even get through this with my positivity and with my other strengths and with my skill set? And that's when I pulled a really bold move and I went to HR and basically said, I suck at my job. I mean, they already knew I wasn't doing good in that role. And I said, but I know I'm a valuable asset to this industry. I know I'm a valuable employee. I love this company. I know I'm in the wrong role because I had worked for that company in a different role, went out on maternity leave, came back, roles changed, and it wasn't a good fit. And I knew it wasn't a good fit. And I rolled the dice. Like it was a really big gamble, but I knew I couldn't sustain in the position that I was in. One, it was miserable to me. And two, I wasn't performing. So it was probably only a matter of time. And that meeting changed my whole career because that was the person that was like, let's put you in a different role. What do you want to do? And he was like, oh, I could use somebody in that role. And that's how I got into HR. That was basically from banking sales to HR, which is a gigantic shift.
Yes.
And he always says it was the best decision he ever made. And then I went through a giant merger and I thought, well, there goes that job because we're going through a big, and we say merger, but we were acquired. And there's one of me and there was one of me at the other institution. And I thought, oh man, and it was way farther, but they kept me. And it has been the best thing for my career. And so you don't know. So sometimes you have to take a gamble on yourself and you have to go in there. I mean, I say it like I was super confident. I was so nervous. I thought I was going to lose my mind. But I said, this is what I'm good at. I know I can do this in HR. I know I could do this. And so I just gambled on myself and I gambled on my strengths.
That's fantastic. And was there actually a position open or was it created?
No.
Whoa.
Sometimes timing is everything. I kind of put it out there like, I know I could be really good at training and leadership development. And at the time he was like, we kind of had this weird program starting and it ended up nothing to do with what I was going to end up doing, but it was the catalyst that the right timing, the right conversation. And he really was really open-minded to think about, I don't want to lose good talent. So really good professionals, really good leaders look at it from like a talent perspective and think, I don't want to lose good talent. Like you might not be the right person for this job, but how can we use you? Because good talent's hard to find.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. I love that story so much.
It was really cool.
Yeah. And so sometimes you see people who maybe, I think I'm pretty intuitive. So I see specific strengths in people that maybe they don't even see in themselves. What do you do in your position when you see someone with certain strengths, but they're sort of in a position or coming at life in business and otherwise in a way that's not aligned with their strengths?
I try to ask as many questions as possible to kind of always a good coaching philosophy. The more the other person talks and kind of gets to the same path that you're on, the better. And I think my positivity helps me because like you, I feel like I really can scout, we call it like strength scouts, scout it in other people. So I try to like always bring it back. Like, wow, if you're really strategic, tell me about a time where you made a decision very quickly, because strategic will make decisions very quickly and it'll usually be the right decision. Or so I'll ask them, and then they end up realigning it themselves, and they end up like reinforcing all those ideas themselves. And if they don't agree with something, I always, tell me why. But I'll often, they'll tell me stories about their life, and I'm very quick at being able to relate it to their strengths. And I'll say, have you thought about, or did you consider this time how you were really using this strength? And they're like, oh gosh, no, I didn't think about it that way. And then we'll talk about it. Like, I'm not like persuading them down that path, but
Right.
a lot of times our minds are closed. Like, our minds don't think about the things that we do. Again, we kind of go back to like always picking out our worst strengths. So when people unlock their 34, where do you think the first place everybody goes to?
The bottom.
The bottom, which stresses me out. Very few people go to the top because they want it, and they often, well, then what do I need to work on? And I'm like, no. Like with the bottom, it kind of is what it is. Like the bottom, and there's a freeing piece when you're like, my number 34 is deliberative, which means I don't really make that great of decisions. Someone that's deliberative will take time to really think about things. They're a little more serious, and they will really weigh, and they will double check, triple check. Anything that they give you is perfect. So like, you would never want to like question a deliberative, like, did you check that? Because they have, but it makes them slower because it has to be perfect to them. And when they give you something, oh my, it's like, they're so risk averse. They will have made the best decision. That is not me. I'm like, oh, what are we doing? Okay, very quickly.
Right.
I'm not going to change that. If I work on my deliberative, no, but I can use my other strengths to help me make better decisions. And I will partner with somebody. What I do now is I look for partners that have different strengths. So I would want to partner with someone that's deliberative because they're going to help me make exceptional decisions.
That's fantastic. When I see a strength in someone and that person doesn't see it in themselves, number one, I sort of try to like jam it into their brain versus be all positive and ask questions like you. And so that's something I need to work on because I want to fix everything immediately. I'm totally a problem solver. And so if you have a problem, I probably have the answer. And then I'm like, why did you not like incorporate that answer into your life? Like,
you said strategic was one of your top, right?
Okay, yes. Okay. So I'm constantly like, okay, this is the answer. Now do it, which is, as you can imagine, amazingly stressful with children because they don't always want to just incorporate mom's advice.
Well, and you usually move very quickly. And usually people are like, wait, like we just caught up. Like, but strategic is awesome because you sort through the crap very, very quickly.
Yes. And absolutely. And I have a BS detector that's like on fire all the time. And so I just try to like sift through all of that. But is it just natural for you in using your positivity to kind of not coax it out of them, but like gently massage it out of them versus me who's like with the hammer? I look like Thor.
Yeah. So I think like when I took the class, it was one of those, like, I felt like I was coming back to the mothership. Like, I was like, was so aligned with what I love that it does come very naturally to me. Like, we had to go through this whole, like, how do you do a coaching session and how do you talk to someone and, how do you ask the right questions? But like, I remember like having like a script, and then like my friend and I were doing this together, and we both like tossed our books, and we were just in it for an hour, and it came so naturally. That's also my communication. I love to talk to people. And I've been, in the training space, we do a lot of team sessions on this and just getting people to look at somebody else. And so I always go back to like experiences. I really like, tell me of a past experience, or have somebody else in the room. Like, you're kind of doing all that already. When you see somebody with really great strengths, keep telling them, I saw when you did this, it was really amazing. Because we don't do enough of that either, like building each other up and telling each other, oh man, when you did that project, or when you did that, you were in your zone. And then people are like, oh, somebody else sees that in me.
Right. Right. And I think sometimes, I don't know when it happened, but I think sometimes we just need permission. And so I will have these creative, like 45-minute creative coaching sessions where we don't work long-term. We just work with that. And there are people who have this amazing experience in their lives, whether they're teaching special needs kids or, a photographer or whatever it is. And I'll say, well, have you considered this? And by the end of the 45-minute call, they're like, oh my gosh, that's a whole new way to look at. So I know that it was in them the whole time, but sometimes we just need the permission
Yes.
to actually acknowledge that we have strengths.
Yes.
Where does
And
that come from?
I don't know. But as women, I want to help. I want other women to be better at that. Because then
Yes.
we know what we do best. And when we scout it out in other people and we tell other people what we do best, like, wow. And when I say, like, I have a dear friend, her number one strength is futuristic. And that's like the Disney theme, because being able to envision a better future. And she's in her business, she's always thinking about the future, the future, the future. And she gets everyone all excited about that. And right now, like, we're in a pandemic. It sucks. Her
Mhm.
futuristic is really helping her through this about what am I going to do for my business? What am I going to do for my family? I'm picturing the end of summer. I'm picturing a year from now. And then the people on her team, have different strengths to help get her to that vision of her future. That's when it's like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I actually recommend, even before we talked, I recommend the assessment to my podcast students in my course, because if you're a podcaster and you're getting your voice out there, like, I'm an outgoing person who sometimes gets a little too loud. I have to like bring my energy, ground myself. Like, I'm extra, but there are other people who are introverts. I can teach people how to put that out there. It's not the same way that I would put what I have out there. And so I think it's really important to understand your strengths when you start a podcast. Because if you're talking about accounting, take it down a notch. I mean, you need to find a way to deliver the information you have in the way that only you can. And whether that's behind her mic or otherwise.
Yep, you nailed it. That's the whole philosophy. Is there's a lot of different ways to get to goal Z. There's many different ways. How I do it is different than you do it. What we do when we think about our strengths and what we bring to the table, that's what makes us unique. There's a ton of people that get up on stage and talk all the time. We do not have the same strengths. We do it differently. I'm louder, but there are people that don't have to be as loud that still can make a huge impact. And so we often try to like emulate somebody else, and then we
Yes.
end up not feeling comfortable and not doing a great job. It's more thinking about how can I get to point B using my own tools, using what I'm best at. And when we have flexibility to allow other people, sometimes we're like, well, I did it this way, so you should do it exactly the same way. But that's not fair. What the cool thing about the Strength Finders is just the top 5, there's 33 million combinations, which really means nobody is as good as you are at what you do. And we're not even talking like all 34, like finding your perfect match strength twin. Just 33 million of just the top 5. Like that's crazy. And that really means that, and that's probably why I've done almost all of the assessments, and I'm certified in a couple. This is my favorite because it's the most unique in terms of combinations. And I like that philosophy that we all are really, really unique. Like, I have a lot of friends that share positivity, but our positivity is different because of our other strengths. And like, a lot of people get positivity and they're like, but I'm not as loud as you, Jenny. I'm like, that's because of my other strengths.
Exactly. It's the combination.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
I like that. I like the idea that we're all different and that we can learn from each other and that we can actually appreciate the differences amongst us.
Yes. And in this time of the world, we need that more than ever. If we can come together and appreciate the strengths in other people, that it's not like you started with this, like the strengths in other people are not weaknesses just because you don't share them. And so really just it's such a very small change of perspective, but it's extremely powerful.
When you start looking at what others bring to the table, it is more powerful and positive, and you really like that. Instead of looking at what's wrong with people, and Dr. Clifton, like the founder, like if I ever went to, the party of anyone dead or alive, he would be my person. He created all this. He's no longer with us. But he said, what happens when we start fixating on what's wrong with people and start appreciating what's good with people? And that's the whole strength philosophy. And you have better relationships as a result. Your teams are better at work. Your relationships at home are better when you start appreciating the differences that people bring and recognizing that those are strengths.
Yes, that's awesome. And a perfect segue, because I want to talk about knowing your strengths in your personal life.
Yes.
So we can talk marriage, we can talk kids, we can talk
Okay.
friendships, even friendships, because, many of us I have friends from high school. One of my best friends is from 7th grade. And so we change as women throughout our lives. And so to be able to appreciate the strengths in each other, but also, really step into the strengths that we have. So what would be your biggest recommendation for, acknowledging and leaning into our strengths in our personal lives?
So one, it's really fascinating. Like, let's take a marriage when two people take the strengths assessment together, because that old philosophy is opposites attract is so true. And so many times, like I'll be doing this in a work setting and the person will be like, oh, I can't wait to go home and tell my wife this, or I can't wait to go home and tell my husband. Like, I'm like, you have permission to say, Jenny says this is a strength. Because we're so different in general, and then we get into our home lives and we're different, and those things drive us crazy about each other until we start recognizing, like, oh, so my discipline, right? I'm super organized, everything has a place, and probably sometimes to the point where I get a little like crazy. Like, I know this about myself. My husband's number one strength is adaptability, so we can either do this all the time, or we come together because I need his adaptability. I need his in the moment to be able to get me to change pace, or, hey, this has happened. We need to be flexible in this sense of it. He's my rock when it comes to that. Instead of driving each other crazy, it's really like, okay, you, again, powerful dynamics, but you have to step back and kind of have that appreciation. Like, if he just complained all the time that everything needs to be picked up around the house, we would be fighting all the time. And we call it Jenny time. And so we've worked over time that if I ask for something like, hey, can you take care of this? I'd be very specific to, is it Jenny time, which means right this second, or is there flexibility? And so, like, I'm like, look, I really need this done right now for whatever reason. Or I'm like, you know what, you have all week to do this. And that has helped with my husband. It's helped with the 9-year-old, the 3-year-old right now is just doing her own thing. And we're just living in her orbit.
That's just the way it is.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's such a good point. Like with my husband, he will do all the things. He just doesn't do you find that if you give him a deadline, even two things. Number one, if you're reasonable with your deadline, not everything is right now.
I'm working on that one, Jackie.
Well, because if everything is right now, it starts to no longer, they don't take it seriously.
Correct.
If everything's the priority, you can't prioritize. But the other thing too is, like, if I say, hey, could you do this Friday by 5? It will get done Friday by 5. But if I just open-end it and
correct.
And when I think about it, I'm actually the same way. If somebody says, hey, can you read this over for me? I'm like, of course. And I'm happy to do it, but I'm not going to prioritize it. I think deadlines are so important for both sides of my marriage. But how do you find, what are some of the other strengths that he or you may have that aren't necessarily seen as compatible?
Well, so I was going to go the other direction, is he also has positivity, but it's a different kind of positivity. And so we kind of like that one together. The biggest one is adaptability and my discipline. My discipline just really, like, it's a very strong one, like your command. Actually, where is his other ones? He is activator like you. Futuristic. And so those are really helpful. The futuristic pairs really nicely with my positivity, because I love talking about the future with him, and like whether it's just where we're going for vacations or what our family dynamic is going to be a year from now. So that's really, really cool. I like that futuristic. And activator like you, that's the good part about when he sometimes is so in adaptability is when you're really in the present. So it's kind of actually at odds with his futuristic, but his adaptability is very present tense. And you throw in the activator, which is action oriented. So he likes to get it done. He likes to get it done when he wants to get it done. And so we've kind of worked with that, because not everything is a priority. But what I have been able to communicate, which has been really important in our marriage, we married 17 years next month. What's really important is, like, I'm not just disciplined and organized and orderly for the fun of it. Like, I feel distress when things are out of order. And so when things are neat and organized, it gives me tremendous peace. And like right now, having everybody in my house 24 hours a day stresses me out. I need some order to feel peaceful. And that allows me then to like do the things that I need to do. And so when I'm feeling discombobulating, I'm feeling like I'm out of sorts right now, it would be really helpful, if we work on this piece of the house or whatever it is, then I'm talking about the things that are important to me, and that makes a difference.
Do you think that some of our strengths, or many of our strengths, sometimes come from negative situations in our childhood, or because when you talk about, I relate so much to you needing order, and I used to be a huge slob, and now I'm like maybe not as orderly as you are, but I like systems, and I like all of that. And as an Aries who's sort of like fly by the seat of my pants, it gives me freedom when I know what's expected and what's next. Many of us have some of these qualities because of things that have happened in our past that weren't necessarily positive. And so is it okay for the listener to go, well, I am that way because of A, B, and C, but to now flip the script and to see that as a strength
Yeah.
instead of um, a product of what happened to them in the past?
Absolutely. And I think that's really important because you're taking more ownership over that. Um, a lot of people talk about like resiliency, and I align like resiliency almost with like with the responsibility theme. And the responsibility strength theme is like, I'm not going to let somebody down. Like your word is my bond. And so sometimes when like negative things happen in our world, or the way we grew up, or things that happen to us, our resiliency really plays into who we are. And I think that we can grow from that. So we can, the positive, negative thing, we can either be stuck in that moment in time and let that define us from a negative perspective, or we can use that in some way. I like to think we can use it for some good. So like, how do I teach others about this? Or how do I say, man, like I was in this crappy situation and I made it through and I'm better for it at the end of the day.
Yeah, I just think it's really important to acknowledge that sometimes people who are loyal and who show up and that you can count on are so much so because they grew up maybe with somebody who wasn't
Yeah.
so loyal or didn't show up for them. And so I want to acknowledge and respect and honor all of the things that have happened to us in the past that bring us right now, and that it's okay now. Today is the day that you're going to look at those attributes that you have as strengths.
Yes. I couldn't agree more. We so much look at ourselves and say, that's not a strength, that's a weakness. But all of that stuff made us the incredible women that we are. It really, really
Yeah.
did. And I think that, again, back to power and edge, that's our power and edge that we get to bring to the table. And it's really cool when you can say, and where sometimes I think as women, we're afraid to say, I'm good at this.
Hmm.
And I think that's important to be able to say, look, I'm really good at it. I have no sorries anymore about my positivity. I used to be like, I'm sorry, I'm so positive. No, I'm a positive person. And I hope people want to be around that sometimes. Maybe not all the time, but a lot of the
Right.
times.
Well, because you're also a positive person who knows when to call things out and
Yeah.
knows when to make things better and to acknowledge that things aren't necessarily all. It's not like everything's sunshine and
No.
roses.
That's the common misconception, that I walk around with my head in the clouds. And when I had a lot of complications with my son when he was born, I was in the hospital for over a month, and then he was in the NICU for over a month. Like,
Wow.
worst time of my life, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I was like, woohoo, he's in the NICU. But my positivity got me through that, because I had to think on the bright side. I had to think about, what are we going to do to get through this? Because I was scared out of my mind. Like, he was born 3 pounds 5 ounces. That's
Oh,
so little. And my first child, and so thinking
yeah.
about, I could have just, got stuck in reading, which I did. I mean, I read all about it. That's my input strength theme. I want to know everything there was to know about a preemie, but I used that for good. I was like, okay, what can I expect? What can I do? How am I going to get through this? And just thinking in like little tiny chunks of time. And now he's running around like a crazy 9-year-old.
Right, which is fantastic. What would you say to someone who's like, you know what, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think I'm going to go check out my 5 or my 34, depending on how much they want to dive in. What would be the biggest piece of advice you would give to somebody who's ready to go over now and find out their strengths?
Keep an open mind. Keep an open mind. Read it and look for the good. Look for what you do well. And then I always say, highlight the stuff that makes you proud. Maybe put an asterisk around the stuff that you're not sure of. Like, there could be stuff that you're not even playing to that would be really, really powerful. And really like sit on it. Like, think about things that you've done in your life where you felt in the zone, and like absorb all of that in your top 5. And then go ask your friends and family, like, hey, can you read this? Tell me your thoughts about it. Because that's really powerful when you're sometimes like, oh, I don't know about this. And then your friends and family are like, oh my gosh, that's so you. That's huge. And there's so many different assessments out there. And I don't play in the space like you can only take one. The more you know about yourself, the more you can articulate that and share with other people, the more we recognize that we can get along better and have better relationships, because we get to say, look, this is what I do. These are the things that make me tick. These are the behaviors that I love. And I think that's what's powerful.
Right. That's amazing. What other assessments are you trained in?
PI, I'm a master certified PI. That's predictive index.
Okay.
So it's really cool. And what I love is when we take all these assessments and then you see all these similarities between yourself, like the different things that come out. So like on the PI, it's measuring things like dominance, extroversion, patience, and formality, but it's very behavior driven. It's one of the few things we're allowed to do pre-hire. And so it's a quick assessment, but it get you really interested in seeing like your behaviors that lead to performance. And so a lot of mine talks about like my positive attitude.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
I'm not super dominant, which I know. I'm high on the extroversion. So it's neat to kind of see those come together. I've done MBTI. I'm ENFJ. I've done DISC. Haven't gotten certified in those, but I'm a fan of more is more. Like take the assessments. Like people will be like, no, you can only take this one. Take the assessments, learn more about yourself, what you like, what you don't like, and communicate that to others.
It's just, I feel like it's the grown-up version of the Cosmo quiz we used to do when we were younger. Except it's actually legit. But it really does help. So you brought up a good point, though. As someone in HR, when someone takes these tests, is there any reason for them to be afraid of that?
No,
because
no.
Will you not hire someone because maybe they're more dominant or...
No, not at all. And so like the strength finders, we can only give that when someone comes on board because it's an engagement tool. The more you play in your strength zone, the more engaged you are at work. The more engaged you are at work, the higher productivity level you have. So it's a really great philosophy from a business perspective. But in terms of the PI, it's looking at, is it a fit for that particular role? So for example, like if I was looking to hire a trainer and the person was really low extroversion, I would ask questions about that. It's a really great tool in terms of like the interview process because someone comes on board and you get half an hour to figure them out. So when they take this assessment ahead of time, I always tell my managers, I'm like, read through it. I'm a fan of highlighting. Highlight the stuff that stands out to you and draw your questions from that and use them as experiential questions. Like, tell me about a time where you did this. It's same thing, same philosophy. And then for a manager, like, wow, like they get a little bit of insights into that person and they have a better dialogue around it. But we don't use it to like put people into different piles, which by the way, I thought at first because I came to the organization through a merger and they're like, take this assessment. And I was like, okay. And I had just started to research the assessment on my own. And then I've learned that no, it's really a tool to figure out what behaviors drive you. What are your motivating factors? And it's really, really cool to see from that perspective. So I like PI. I like them all. I love Gallup. I love Gallup. I mean, Gallup does a great job just from employee engagement and analytics, and I appreciate that. But they're all great tools.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really cool because you're absolutely right in that when you're in an interview, it's just the same generic questions and you can't really understand how somebody would show up in the workplace. So if you know a little bit and how they deal with life, it helps.
Very much so.
So your coaching, is that just done in your internal, where you are business-wise, or do you actually coach people outside of that?
I do both. That was a great question. Yeah. So I do a lot of it at work, and that's a lot of my day-to-day job. But outside of work, people ask me all the time for coaching, and I do a lot for nonprofits and individual coaching and team dynamics. So when I have free time, I absolutely do that. And I really enjoy that. I really love doing that for my community and for friends and family and random strangers.
So if somebody wanted to hire you and listening and they think you're amazing and is that something that they'd be able to do?
Yeah. I do a little bit. I do a little bit here and there on the side, and it's been really fun. And it just enhances my skill set and allows me to meet new people, which feeds my woo.
Excellent. So if you are interested in working with Jenny, just email me at hello@40thrive.com and I will put you in touch. Does that work for you?
That was awesome. That was amazing.
Well, I mean, I just think you have so much to offer that, I think if someone listens and they go and do it, that's great. But if they want to deepen the relationship, I think it's a really great idea for them to contact you.
I would love that. I'm happy to help people, and anything that makes them feel better about themselves, I'm totally down with.
Awesome. Jenny, thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. Let me ask you 2 quick questions. Have you subscribed? It's easy to do and helps you get alerts when a new episode is up in your favorite podcast app. And have you shared it with a friend? That's the simplest way to help grow the show and help more and more women over 40 thrive. I really appreciate you pressing play today. I know you have a lot going on and it's not lost on me. Until next time, take care and keep thriving.
Spring has sprung, and with the change of seasons, sometimes comes an increase in vitality. If you're feeling in the mood for a little more personal time, may I suggest Coconut. Coconut is all about providing clean and natural ingredients when you're enjoying your most intimate moments, with or without a partner. naturally safe products developed by people who are obsessed with quality. Get 15% off with promo code GROWNASS at grownasswoman.guide/Kokanoo. That's 15% off with promo code GROWNASS at grownasswoman.guide/Kokanoo.